Hello and welcome to our channel. In today's vlog we will take you to one of the most picturesque places in the world, the city of Porto. Of course, we will drink a lot of port wine, we will even take you on a wine cellar tour with a Porto tasting and let you know whether it's worth it or not. We will also show you the most beautiful viewpoints, take a cable car ride, try the most famous Porto dish Francesinha, visit the famous Lello Bookshop which inspired J.K. Rowling while she was creating Hogwarts and Harry Potter, and show you all the most beautiful places you must see in Porto. Make sure to stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with our travels, as new vlog from Lisbon is coming soon. Hello everyone and welcome to our channel. Today we are in Porto and we would like to show you this beautiful city with its narrow streets, endless wine cellars and picturesque views. We are going to show you port wine tasting, most interesting attractions and best places to eat. But first let me show you our Airbnb with this amazing postcard view. The apartment was located in Vila Nova de Gaia, a town across the river from Porto. But don't let that fool you. Although it is not technically Porto, we are actually right in the city center, plus we had the famous wine cellars right at our doorstep, so the location was absolutely perfect. The apartment came with 2 bedrooms and we paid 120 euros per night for 4 people. If you are interested, you can find the link in the description below.
So let's move across the river to Porto. The first and most important point that you can't miss is the historic Ribeira District, situated in the old town, which will enchant you with its narrow cobblestone streets and centuries-old townhouses decorated with colorful azulejos, the characteristic Portuguese ceramic tiles. It is no coincidence that the historic center of Porto is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. We must admit that Ribeira is an extremely lively district. There is no shortage of trendy bars and restaurants, especially along the promenade that stretches along the Douro River. Heading up from Ribeira and passing the square bearing the name of Henrique the Sailor will bring you to the market hall, which you can easily spot from a distance thanks to its bright red color. Next to the square is also the neoclassical Palacio da Bolsa. But coming back to the market hall, the building was constructed in 1885 and against the expectations of many tourists, you won't find there something like the Time Out Market in Lisbon, but instead stalls selling handicrafts and souvenirs. You could say that the market hall is a kind of space for art and small vendors offering their handmade goods.
A place we can't miss in this video is a restaurant called Voltaria, where you'll find really delicious food, by far the best we've eaten in Porto, and the prices are surprisingly affordable. For this reason, prepare for rather long queues, as unfortunately it is impossible to make a reservation. Finally, on the second try after an hour of wait, we finally got a table. We decided to try a variety of Portuguese specialties, including the traditional green soup caldo verde and several appetizers. For the main course we ordered cod with potatoes in a creamy bechamel sauce, which looked more like a dessert than a main course. However, that's not really what we came for. The highlight of the show was a popular dish originating from Porto, the Francesinha. It is a sort of Portuguese croque madame, or otherwise a heart attack on the plate. Among other things, the dish consists of layers of toasted bread, pork and sausage, all baked with a cheese and topped with beer sauce. Apparently, Francesinha is a dish you have to try in Porto, but in our opinion once will be enough. Afterwards we were tempted by a delicious dessert similar to crema catalana and a glass of port wine. In the afternoon we walked across the river to Vila Nova de Gaia, where we booked one of the most popular attractions in the city, a tour of port wine cellars combined with a tasting. Here you will also find a very lively pedestrian street along which famous wine cellars such as Sandeman, Calem, Ferreira, Cruz, Taylor's and many others are located.
We went for Calem, but basically it doesn't matter which one you choose. The experience looks more or less the same everywhere. You visit the wine cellars with a guide who tells you about Porto, introduces you to the history of the wine, talks about the production process and types of port, as well as about the cellars themselves. Sometimes a visit to the museum is included in the price, just as it was in our case. Tours always end with a tasting of 2 or 3 types of Porto, which costs 15 or 17 euros respectively, and in most cellars the price list looks identical. We obviously opted for a tasting of 3 different types of wine. We recommend buying tickets online directly from the website of the selected winery. If we were to recap the whole experience, on the positive side the guide was certainly great, telling the story of port production in a really interesting way. The interactive museum and the cellars themselves were also truly impressive. In particular the huge barrels that would even accommodate a car, which was nicely demonstrated in the projection. In addition, Calem had some really delicious port. We also tried the wine from the Sandeman and Ferreira cellars, but in our opinion they had the best one in Calem. On the downside, the massive groups. There are as many as 45 people, and especially at the tasting it got a little cramped. In addition, the groups entered every 15 minutes, so our guide sometimes literally crossed paths with the guide of the French group that entered after us. Because of those small intervals, there was virtually no time to see the museum or take any photos. During the tasting we tried 3 types of port: white, ruby and tawny. We recommend tawny with its deep oak flavor, which is a result of double aging, first in large and then in small barrels. The whole tour lasted about 1.5 hours, but it should be noted that we were not in a hurry to drink the port, as the tasting has no time limit. When you are done drinking, you can visit the store, which you have to pass through while heading towards the exit.
After port wine tasting, it's time for a cable car ride, of course. This is a great way to get from the lower promenade to the upper level of the King Louis I bridge, which we can use to go to the very center of Porto. You will pay 6 euros for a single ride on the Teleferico de Gaia, and it's really worth it because the views of the city's orange rooftops and the famous bridge are really unforgettable. The upper station of the cable car is right next to Jardim do Morro, a green garden park with stunning views of the river and Porto. It is an extremely popular spot for watching the sunset, especially among young people who came here with a bottle of wine in a party mood.
Amazed by the upper part of the city and the quiet life in Vila Nova de Gaia, we strolled around the area for a while longer, then headed towards Porto via the upper level of the King Louis I bridge, an iconic symbol of the city. The Ponte Dom Luis I is a massive steel 2-story bridge, which is deceptively similar in its style to the Eiffel Tower, and for a good reason. After all, it was designed by one of Eiffel's apprentices, Théophile Seyrig. The bridge opened in 1886 and has 2 levels. Pedestrians can use both, while a metro tram runs on the top and cars drive on the lower one. From the bridge you will exit directly into the heart of Porto. At this point, it's worth to mention the Sao Bento train station, a place you will certainly pass by. Although direct trains from Lisbon do not arrive there anymore, it's really worth a visit, mainly because of the beautiful azulejos portraying events from Portuguese history. The station's name derives from the fact that there was a Benedictine monastery on its site.
After that, we headed to Fabrica da Nata. However, the pastries from this pastry shop were actually some of the inferior ones compared to the other places we've had a chance to try. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you won't miss our vlog from Lisbon, where we'll show you the best places to eat the famous pastéis de nata pastries. Leaving the pastry shop, we ended up on the main pedestrian street, the Rua das Flores, where you will find many bars and souvenir stores and even a puppet museum. Here we strongly advise you to beware of pickpockets who take advantage of this crowded promenade. The history of the street itself dates back to the early 16th century, and its name Flower Street originated from the Bishop's Gardens previously located here. If you are looking for unusual souvenirs, we can recommend a store called Toranja with very cool posters. We took one of them home, where it decorates our living room.
Then, out of pure curiosity, we visited the supposedly most beautiful McDonald's in the world, on the site of the former Café Imperial. Indeed, it looked quite different and impressive. It was very elegant with crystal chandeliers in Art Deco style. In an area called Carmo, you can board one of the more traditional means of transport, a vintage streetcar that, among other places, will take you to the seaside district of Foz. Carmo takes its name from the Carmelite church located here, with an impressive wall covered entirely with azulejos. A keen eye will notice that there are actually two churches here, the Carmelites on the left and the Order of Our Lady of Mount Carmel on the right. Surprisingly, entry to the church on the left is free. You have to buy a ticket to visit the other.
This time in Porto, we also decided to visit the famous Lello Bookstore, which inspired J.K. Rowling when she created Hogwarts and the world of Harry Potter. It was opened in 1906 and is claimed to be one of the 3 most beautiful bookstores in the world. We were quite skeptical about this visit as we heard about huge queues of several hours to enter, but we bought a ticket online for €5 and to our surprise we didn't have to stand in line at all. It turned out that only those who buy tickets on the spot stand in line. Why wouldn't they buy them online? Until today we don't know, especially since there is a sign on the site where it says to buy tickets online, plus they are a bit cheaper. The bookstore is impressive, but there are such crowds inside that we felt like getting out of there as soon as possible. There was a huge squeeze and it was barely possible to see anything. We rather wouldn't have been satisfied with this visit after waiting in line for 2 hours. It is worth mentioning that if you buy a ticket for €5, you can deduct this amount when buying books, but remember that the cheapest mini books cost around €17.
The nearby Praça de Lisboa is recently landscaped city square where young Porto residents gather to chill. It's a cool urban space with cafes and some stores. Passing the square you will come straight to the famous Clerics Tower. At 75.6 meters high, it was once the tallest building in Portugal. To get to the very top, you not only have to pay €6 for a ticket, but also climb 240 stairs. While exploring the charming, if somewhat neglected streets of Old Porto, it's worth hitting the Miradouro da Vitoria viewpoint, which offers a beautiful panoramic view of the city and Vila de Gaia. Admission to this place is free.
What's the best thing to do in Porto? Get lost in the charming streets with colorful houses, hanging laundry and cheerful grandmothers who look out from their balconies and are eager to initiate conversation. In Portuguese, of course, and they don't mind that we don't understand each other at all.
We spent our last afternoon hanging out in Vila de Gaia. We felt like trying Porto from another producer and ended up at Porto Cruz. This time it was not an organized tour and we ended up at a rooftop bar with a beautiful panorama view of Porto. Unfortunately the terrace was very crowded and we didn't get a table, but nevertheless it's a nice place to check out. Instead we decided to have a drink in front of the Sandeman winery where we tasted a 10-year-old Porto. A few moments later we ended up at a sardine store where you can buy a can of sardines with your year of birth. But unfortunately it is quite expensive and touristy, however very Instagrammable. The place, calling itself the Portuguese home of codfish croquettes, is as touristy as the previously visited can store. A gentleman playing the organ gives it a slightly creepy atmosphere. We tried the croquettes in Lisbon, so we weren't tempted this time.
Finally, we checked out a former market hall with various food stands. Apparently there are several good restaurants there, and what's important, they are also open during siesta time, so when you get a little hungry in the afternoon, it's worth stopping by. We hope you enjoyed our vlog from Porto, and if so, make sure to leave a thumbs up as it makes a big difference for our small channel. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to see our upcoming videos from other amazing destinations in Europe.